Hello and welcome to the T2 Hubcast with me, Bernice Casserly.
And me, Spencer Locker.
Hi, Spence. I've just said hi whilst you're having a drink of your water.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
he's quite warm today, and I'm going to stay hydrated for quality content.
Definitely, always.
Appropriately hydrated.
Yeah, it's that time of year at the moment for us where typically it's a little bit quieter for us because our clients are all enjoying the nice hot weather.
Well, yeah. It's school holidays, isn't it? Yeah, people are out there spending an inordinate amount of money, more than they would have spent last month or next month.
So, Spencer, opportunity for us to just sit down and actually kind of record a podcast on a topic which I think a lot of our listeners potentially may relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I'll let you jump in.
So his blogs to change from a print perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, Bernice, but for me, I suspect it is the same. All the clients that we work with, so as you know, T2 work across all sectors, public sector, private sector, elite sports and military. We cover the whole gamut of groups, organisations, companies, you name it, we cover the lot. And I think that whenever we come across an organisation, a team, a group, the vast majority of the time, any problems, issues or concerns, any underperformance, any lack of focus, anything, any problems that they encounter could be really put into two categories, change and communication.
100%.
Change done badly and ineffective communication. And in fact, you could probably lump those two together, change done badly with ineffective communication.
Yes.
Whether it's individual people who are disillusioned or demotivated, or we're looking at organisations that are just not hitting what they want to hit, or achieving the outcomes they want to achieve, or maybe there is a level of a low level of psychological safety. It's all, if you break it all down, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, it's change and communication.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with everything that you just said there, Spencer. And just thinking of every time we do work with either a team face-to-face or run a virtual session, or we're doing one-to-one coaching, so often the biggest challenges that people are facing at work at the moment is this has happened and this is how I feel about it, or this is how I'm reacting to it, or it's a case of I'm leading this change myself within my organisation, and this is what I'm seeing for people, and they're not too sure what to do about that. And the reality is that today's modern world is so fast-paced, and businesses and organisations are having to transform and change at a rapid rate, so much more than what they had to 10, 20, 30, 40 plus years ago. And you know what? We need to get really good at being able to understand who I am as a human being, and actually kind of what's the reason why in certain situations when something happens within the organization, I do respond well and I completely buy into that change or that transformation. But why is it on some occasions I struggle and I find it difficult? And from the research and the work that we do at T2 through print, we can often see that for so many of us, it really does jump back to our core unconscious motivators.
Yeah, when we start thinking about those times when we're all dragged into a presentation, whether it's virtual or face-to-face, and a person who's at the top of the organisation stands up in front of us, and the four words that will send shivers down many people's spines: we're going on a journey. We're going on, and he's like, oh God, not again. And I think what we've got to understand, I think everybody, for whatever position you're in or whatever role you fill, change is like Thanos. It's inevitable. And as you sort of alluded to there, it's happening more and more for different reasons, and we've got to get on board as much as it might be, as you said there, with our unconscious motivators, because we all see the world through different lenses for different reasons. We can sometimes we will experience, we'll be introduced to change, whatever form it takes, and we could sit there and think, is it just me who feels this way? Or we could also think, everybody must feel this way. Yeah? So we can sort of marginalize ourselves, or we could sort of say, well, we can justify it. Well, I see it this way, so surely everybody else sees it this way. So if everybody else sees it this way, well, everybody else is going to be resistant to it because I'm not, for whatever reason. And it's going to be down to our unconscious motivators.
Definitely. And when it comes to print, and for anyone listening to this podcast, and perhaps you've never heard of print, we do have another podcast that actually really does go into depth around kind of print, the tool, the model, where it comes from, and what these unconscious motivators mean. So I would definitely recommend that you check that out. And if it is something that you are interested in and you want to know what your motivators are, then please certainly do get in touch. And potentially, hopefully, we've got quite a few listeners on this who have awareness of what those unconscious motivators are. And you know what, it might be at the moment that there's something going on at work and I'm really struggling with it. Help me out. This is definitely the podcast for you. So with print, we'll have the survey identifies what on completion that we'll have 2 unconscious motivators, and each one of those motivators has a number.
Yeah, I think it might be worth sort of digging in here just a little bit, in the fact that we've got all 9. There are 9 unconscious motivators, and we've got all 9 in us.
Yes.
We've got all 9 of the unconscious motivators in us, but they're in different orders. And what we're doing is, when we're looking at these 2 unconscious motivators that drive our behaviour more than any others, these are the top 2. These are the top 2 that were, in the vast majority of times, they are going to be why we do what we do, why we see the world the way we do, why we prioritise certain things and deprioritise other things. And when we meet other people, when we collaborate with other people, when we work with other people, if they prioritise the same things in the same way as us, you know what? We have a good day. And we rub along together, and we start to develop trust, and we start creating relationship, because you know what, this person is a bit like me, and I like me, or so I understand this person. Yeah. However, sometimes you can run across people who do things in a different way. They prioritise different things. They may even deprioritise what you prioritise, in which case now that doesn't put you in a good place. That's not, and if you listen to the other podcasts that we reference print on, you'll remember we talk about things like shadow self and or potential shadow and anticipated best self behaviour.
Yes, definitely. So with print, so we all have, as you mentioned there, Spencer, all 9 within us, but it all shows up in completely different ways. And the survey identifies what your top 2 core unconscious motivators are, and ultimately that's what drives how you view the world, how you think, feel, act, and behave. Now, the terminology there is unconscious motivators. What does that mean?
So when we start considering unconscious motivators, these are things that are not in the conscious. You do not make a conscious decision to do certain things. One of the things that just to try and give you a bit of an example, one of the unconscious motivators represented by the number 2 is to be needed and appreciated. And on the initial sort of view of that, you might think to yourself, oh, needy. No, not by any stretch of the imagination does it mean needy. All it means is you prioritise other people's needs above your own. And that can show up in different ways. For instance, one of the things we work a lot with emergency services, and we find a lot of 2s in police, fire, ambulance, NHS. We also find them in teachers, and we also find them in social workers. It's not that you want recognition or acknowledgement. It's that you want to be of service. Yes. And again, this is not a conscious decision. It's within you. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking to yourself, well, I prioritise other people's needs. I do this for this person and that for that person. And the job I do, I do it because I like to be of service. I like to prioritise. That's where we're looking at. But the thing is, it might not show up like that in you. But when you start putting things into your own context and you start thinking, right, okay, this is something that is important to me. I prioritize it in my life. And you'll meet other people who do similar things, and that what they do makes sense to you. But you might find that you're running into people who don't do that. And that you might struggle with that, because I'm sure you'll agree, Bernice, we all try and do the right thing, don't we?
Of course.
But we don't all do the same thing, so we can't all be right. True. So when we have this sort of self-serving bias, this internal bias, that we can justify every action we ever take, every decision and every action we ever take, we can justify it. Even if it didn't necessarily serve us well or achieve the purpose. It's not my fault they didn't understand. It's not my fault that they're stupid. It's not my fault that there's no empathy there or no patience. But for us, because the thing is, I heard this the other day. I've thought of it for a while, but I'd never heard it this pithy. We judge other people by their actions, but we judge ourselves by our intentions. So, because we don't know what other people's intentions are, all we can see is their actions. Yes. So, what they do and they don't do, we will compare and contrast to our intentions. So, but then again, with our intentions, we might intend to do a certain thing and not actually do it. But I wanted it to do it, and it's thought that counts. Well, actually, no, it's the action that counts. But if you can get the intent and the action together, great stuff. But again, it's just this justifying why I go through life the way I do. I make the decisions and take the actions the way I do. But different people do it in different ways. Yes. Yeah, like you and I, for instance, we've both got different unconscious motivators. It doesn't mean to say that it's a binary thing. You either do what I do or I'm against you. That doesn't mean that. But it means that you will prioritize certain things that I don't. And we've been in a situation which I'm sure I will mention in the future, but we've been in a certain situation where this was glaringly obvious, at least for me. But we'll get back to that in a minute.
Yeah. But spot on, it is because we are viewing the world through two very different angles because of those core unconscious motivators. And I think one thing that might be valuable for us to maybe discuss, Spencer, is if these are our unconscious motivators. So that simply tells us this is what we motivate towards. Then surely there's an aspect of this which is all around what is it then that we seek to avoid?
Yes, I suppose so. I mean, we do talk about this when we talk about sense of purpose. We say that there's a number of sense of purposes and there's a number of different unconscious motivators. But ultimately, I think if we break it down to try and be a little bit more binary, when we go through life, we're all moving through life in the same direction. What is motivating us through that life? Are we moving towards something that we want, or are we moving away from something that we don't want? Yes. So when we start considering from a print perspective, on the face of it, it's sort of pretty straightforward. The actual titles, the names of the unconscious motivators are pretty self-explanatory, but shouldn't be taken literally, because you might sort of think, well, okay, I sort of don't see that, but I need to put it into my own context. I need to put it in, sort of bounce it around in my head so that I can sort of say, well, okay, I see this, but it looks like this in me.
Yeah. And we have to bear in mind as well is that we'll have two. So what we'll do in a moment is just kind of take a quick glance at these 9 unconscious motivators and kind of just top level think about, well, what does that mean in regards to what's the seek to avoid? But bearing in mind that for every single one of us, we've got 2 unconscious motivators, and it's how do they connect and interact with each other, which is then where it differs. And as you said there, Spencer, it's really important to think about, well, what does that look like to me in my world?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the beauties, one of the real, one of the things that I love about print is it's so easily accessible. Yet it isn't just skimming across the top. It gives some really sort of tangible examples. But like everything else, you've got to be able, you cannot accept it at face value. You've got to interrogate it. You've got to put it into your own context. You've got to look at some of these things, because I know particularly when people go into sort of the shadow of self page 6, and they're looking at it and they're going, oh, that's a bit extreme, isn't it? And yes, it might be extreme, but now you've got to look at it as like a dimmer switch. And you've got to go, okay, so if that dimmer switch is at 10 and I'm looking at that example going, that's a bit extreme. What if I turn it down to 5? What does that look like? And can I relate to that? Because it might be at 10, level 10. Well, no, that's definitely not me. I would never do that. But at 5, maybe I would do that, but it looks like this.
Yes.
And I think the one, for me particularly, I really got to understand this when I shared it with somebody else. So I shared it with somebody I trust, and I showed it to them, and they went straight to page 6. And then they sort of said, what about these things here that are underlined? And I said, don't worry, they don't apply to me. And they went, really? Really? I'm like, well, what do you mean? I said, right. And they gave me an example. I said, well, do you remember you did this in this particular place? And I went, yeah. She said, that's that. I said, no, it isn't. She went, yes, it is. So it's recognizing that other people can be the key to this. Yes. Other people can see behaviors in us that we might be a little bit blind to, or we can justify. So yeah, sharing it, I think, is an absolute game changer.
Definitely. And also as well, bear in mind that when we come to shadow behavior, which is when those unconscious motivators aren't being met and satisfied, the key language and word that's used is potential. You might have never been in a situation so extreme for that behavior to display, but there could still be potential in the future.
Absolutely.
So let's just have a quick touch on these 9 motivators. So going through each unconscious each number, what's the motivation towards, but then the seek to avoid. Okay. So of course, starting in a nice logical way with 1. So the first unconscious motivator is
to be perfect, correct, and right.
Yes. So if we then start to think about, well, what does this mean in regards to, if that's the motivation for things to be perfect, correct, and right, what are we seeking to avoid? So officially, potentially, it might be making mistakes, or maybe even that feeling of something being wrong.
Yeah. So again, it needs to be put. I mean, I'm sure you and James have gone through all 9 when we've talked about the unconscious, the titles of unconscious motivators. So I don't really want to sort of go over old ground. However, one of the things about ones is they like structure and like process, because they understand that if you follow a certain process which is proven, then you'll get the outcome that you require for them in their mind. So when we start thinking about that, it might be that, okay, we're looking at things being inaccurate or not up to a certain standard. Well, what feeds that? Chaos. Yeah. So spontaneity, things that are not planned out correctly, or to them, it's not planned out correctly. Yeah. Please don't think that it's not being planned out correctly. It's just not up to the standard of a 1. So things that I mean, you don't have to be a 1 when we say things like, well, if it doesn't make sense, because any of the unconscious motivators, if it doesn't sort of align with your unconscious motivator, it's not going to make sense to you. But for a 1, they like structure, they like order, they like certain things done in a certain way. And again, when we're starting to turn about that dimmer switch, turning it up and down, to some people it's not that important. I'd really like it to be done this way, but if it's not, well, whatever. So that might be that you've got a low 1, but potentially if you've got a high 1, no, actually this is a non-negotiable. Yeah. It's like with when we talk about spontaneity. If you come into work and your boss turns around and goes, do you know what you're doing today? And everyone will go, of course, I know exactly what I'm doing today. I know what I'm going to be doing at 10 o'clock. I know what I'm going to be doing at 10:04. And then your boss turns around and goes, right, forget that. We're going to do this. A 1 will potentially lose their mind, because in their head, they've still got to fit all this stuff in that order, in that time frame. But now something's come out of left field that I'm not informed about. I don't know. I may know a bit about it, but it's not about the whether I know about this or not. It's what effect that's going to have on the rest of the day, or what my expectations are, or outcomes that I've got to achieve in certain ways. So chaos. Yeah. Chaos is good.
And again, that connects to I'm sure people can think about situations in a business or organization that's going through change, how they just in that initial emotional, or just the initial response or reaction may be when change happens, because it might connect back into the motivation and what that seeks to avoid.
Yeah. So if you would think about some of the stuff that we've talked about before, that like visionary leadership, where you're trying to sell people a dream. So you've got somebody who is in the C-suite who's going to deliver this change program or an introduction to a change program or whatever, and they get up there and they start talking about vision and they start talking about the future and they're talking about all these good things and all this, that, and the other. And if a one is triggered into that because you know what, this has come out of left field, I wasn't expecting this, or they've not got enough detail, or they don't understand why the change is happening.
Yes.
So now a one can potentially be resistant to change. Yeah. It's all well and good you're talking about all these things that are going to happen in 18 months' time, but if we don't sort this thing out now, we ain't going to get there.
Yes.
Yeah? So, because that's important to them, because with ones, again, they like structure, again, to varying degrees. So for a one, if you're going to want to achieve Foxtrot, you'll do Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo to get Foxtrot, yeah? And I know this to be true. Again, it's not the same for everyone. However, when people like you turn up, because you're a 7, aren't you?
I am. I'm a one's worst nightmare.
So you can turn around, you can bounce in and say, why can't we pop in at Quebec or Sierra or Tango? Because we'll still get to Foxtrot, but it'll be a different Foxtrot. It'll be an interesting Foxtrot. It'll be a more robust Foxtrot. It'll be a sexy Foxtrot. And the one is there going, no. Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta. Yeah. So the thing is, again, even with the best intentions, we have the capacity to block people's capacity for change.
100%. Moving to 2. So the second unconscious motivator, to be needed and appreciated. And as you said a moment ago, well, the language sometimes gets seen as needy, which certainly isn't the case. It's someone who wants to be of service to others. So if that's the motivation, what would your thoughts be, Spence, in regards to, well, what is it that they're deep down trying to potentially seek to avoid?
Right. So when we talk about 2s, they're very, very empathic people. They can walk into a room and feel if somebody's feeling a bit shabby. And if that happens, they will have to do something about it. They can't just walk away and leave it. They've got to be there. They've got to help. And the thing is, not everybody wants help. Not everybody. Some people need to sit in the mud a little bit, and as some people call it, some people need to deal with what's going on in their way. Sometimes they're, and I say this advisedly, they're suffering. Their process is the thing that gives them the capacity to find the way out of it. However, when a 2's there, if a 2 wants to go in and help people, be of service, and people sort of hold them at arm's length or push them away a little bit, well, actually, now I need to... Why are you resisting? Why are you resisting? I want to help. And the thing is, that can actually push people away even further. So that means that 2's chasing them even further. So now it's like, I don't know whether you're old enough to remember Benny Hill, when you've got somebody running away and somebody's chasing him, and he's like, no, I need this. I'm working my way through it. But the 2 is to be of service. But if that is resisted, if that is dismissed, or maybe even, and we tend to find this when we're being if there is an acknowledgement of what you've done as a 2, if he's acknowledged, and I don't mean a marching band and a ticker tape parade, but just a bit of eye contact and a bit of genuine, I see what you did there, thank you for that. It just makes their day. Yeah? But even if it's not acknowledged, then actually, if he's an act that has benefited others, then a 2 has the capacity to see that and go, well, you know what? They may not have noticed that they're going to benefit from this, but I know. And I'm working. When you start thinking about some of the firefighters, police, ambulance, they don't necessarily get the thanks that they deserve or the acknowledgement that they deserve, but they still do the job. Yeah. The problem seems to come when they are blamed for something that they haven't done. Yeah, or it is mentioned that they've not maybe taken something into account or something like that. If you want to get a 2's back up, blame them for something that they haven't done. Oh, yeah. So now we're starting to think about these triggers, which you've talked about in the which has been discussed in other podcasts. When these triggers happen, they put us into shadow behaviour, these potential shadow behaviours. And when we're in potential shadow, that's when this resistant to change, the blocks to change can make themselves known.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing that I do love as well is, Spencer, how many years have you been working with print now?
Nearly 7.
7 years. And I've only been working with print now for a year and a bit. So I'm loving this because it's an opportunity just to get a little insight into kind of the sheer amount of experience that you have of seeing all of these unconscious motivators. So moving on to the 3, to succeed and achieve. Tell us about that.
Really interesting. So with the succeed and achieve, these are people who are driven to succeed and achieve. These tend, and I've got to sort of say this, because earlier you mentioned about the 2 unconscious motivators.
Yes.
And one of the things about the 3 is that 3s tend to be very much focused on the future, the outcome, the flag on the hill, the destination, not necessarily the journey, not necessarily how we achieve that destination. Many 3s won't give a damn about how we're going to achieve it because they'll put a team together who can achieve it. Yeah. I'll make sure you know where you're going and what we need to achieve. You just get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that sort of maybe they say it's a lack of attention to detail. I just think it's a prioritization of something else. It's prioritization of, so everybody knows what's going on, where we're going. I'm going to pick the team up and throw them at that horizon. That's the flag on the hill. Yeah. That's what we need to succeed and achieve. However, if that is a major motivator or even a minor motivator, if it's mixed with another motivator, maybe one of the thinker motivators, so if it's a 3-5 or a 1-3 or something like that, well, actually, yes, they're very much focused on the destination, but that other motivator makes them just as interested on the journey. So one of the things we found, and I've just I found it more and more when I come across 3 1s and 1 3s. So 3s in themselves will take a path of least resistance. They will cut corners. They will because it's the outcome that matters. Yes. Yeah. Whereas 1s will not cut corners. No, absolutely not. They will not cut corners. So when you mix a 1 and a 3, now you've got the potential for a bit of internal turmoil. Yeah. Right, I need to achieve this and I need to get this done, but it needs to be done right. Yeah. So one of the things that that seems to be prevalent with 1-3s and 3-1s, and I'm not saying that it's just those numbers. It might be mixing a 3 with a 6 or a 5 or something like that. However, particularly with 1s, they are prepared to cut corners to achieve an outcome as long as it doesn't compromise the integrity of what they're trying to achieve. Yeah, that's very, very important for them. Yeah. So it's not only what they need to achieve, but it's how they achieve it as well. Yeah. So yeah, very interesting people. But 3s, the 3 is as an unconscious motivator to succeed and achieve. And not only this, and I do find that it's very, very important for them to be seen to be successful in achieving. Okay, so it's not only just that they are successful in achieving, but other people need to know that. Yeah, and I don't mean that from an arrogant perspective, but it's just that, you know what, I'm smashing it. Yeah. Why shouldn't everybody else know that I'm smashing it? Yes. But again, we find that they've got an eye for detail that might be perceived as being 1. So we know somebody who's got a 3 in their number. Who potentially says, I'm sure I must have a 1 in my numbers. That must be very influential. And
there's a catchphrase that is often used around T2 Towers, which is the devil's in the detail.
Yes, absolutely. And it is, but it's for different reasons.
Yes.
So for when you look at a 1, the devil is in the detail because it needs to be perfect, correct, and right. When you're looking at a 3, the devil is in the detail because I want to succeed and achieve.
And we don't want to fail or look bad.
Exactly that. So again, we're looking at the same thing, but from different perspectives for different reasons. But again, very comparable. We don't want to fail. But again, when we start thinking about 3s, they're very much focused on the success. If they start thinking about the failure, the chances are they're going to be going in shadow.
Yes.
And we don't want them in shadow because, again, that's going to be blocks to potential success.
Definitely. Should we move to the 4?
Oh, yes.
So the 4, to be special and find meaning in life.
Yeah, so these are people who like similar to 7s. They are what I like to call delightful disruptors, because 4s and 7s won't accept things at face value. They will ask why, and some
Definitely.
people will think that's well, just shut up and get on with it. Yeah. No. You want the best out of me. I need to understand why we're doing it this way. Yeah, or why we're doing this thing, or why we're prioritizing this thing. And that's the thing, is if you explain it to them, they'll be, okay, that makes sense to me, and we can go.
Yeah.
But because of the people who are 4s and 7s, this is why we get progress. This is why when people question things, and you've got good people, honest people, forthright people who will sit there and go, well, why do we do it that way? Actually, that's a really good question. Is there any other ways we can do it? And of course, 4s and 7s think outside the box. Yes. They're imaginative solutions, creative, things like that. So with the 4, you've got this to be special and find meaning in life, thinking outside the box, questioning what's accepted and things like that. I think for me, one of the things about 4s is they will emotionally invest in what they do. They're very, very passionate about what they do.
Definitely.
It means something to them. They've put whatever the thing that you've asked them to do, and if they've picked it up and run with it, they will put their heart and soul into what they've got to achieve.
Yes.
So when they produce this thing that they've created, that is, you know what? They know what they've got to create, but they've been imaginative, and they've put something special in there, and all this, that, and the other, and they produce it. If it isn't what the person wanted, they'll go, that's not what I wanted. Give it here, I'll do it my bloody self. A 4 will take that personally, because they've put a bit of their heart and soul into what they're doing. Yeah?
Yeah.
So when we start thinking about things to avoid, ordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah? Predictable.
Yes.
Yeah? Boring. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. So again, with the 4, sometimes we find with the 4s they're very creative. Sometimes they don't necessarily create things, but they will take something and give it a bit of a zhuzh. Yeah, so that it looks a bit sparkly and a little bit different, and it's not just necessarily at face value, but they can see potential where other people can't. Yeah. So if it's boring, mundane, if it doesn't speak to their soul.
It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, feel exactly. If it doesn't feel right, they're not going to get on board, and they're going to be in their shadow, definitely.
Moving to 5, which is quite different to the 4. So the 5th one, the motivation is to be knowledgeable and smart.
Yes. So again, it's a thinker number. When we start considering that, comparing it to the one which we've talked about, so they too like process. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the right process. It's just a set process. They can create their own processes. But for the 5s, the knowledgeable and smart, give me detail, give me data, because it's very, very important for me to create something of quality. So if we think about, I mean, we've talked about social styles and the analytical within the social styles. So if you, sorry to go off slightly off topic, but if we look at things like the driver and the analytical, both very much results focused, but let's say, for instance, the driver, let's say 3. We've talked about 3s. Some 3s can be drivers. So it's get stuff done. Yeah? The analytical is also results focused. They want to get stuff done, but they want to get stuff done right. And that is the subtle difference between the two. So knowledge, information, data, and the time to collate it. Yes. So if you want to trigger a 5, don't give them very much information, but expect quick results from the little bit of information you've given them. Yeah. And when we start talking about resistant to change, they will need supporting evidence. Why are we changing? What is the point of the change? What is the why? What is it we're actually trying to achieve from this change? So for them, they will need all that stuff. But not only will they need the stuff like that, they will need time to collate that information.
And even if you flip it and think of, let's say, for example, it isn't that they are seeking information, but others are seeking information in them, and they almost feel a little bit kind of like, oh, this is a little bit too much. I'm feeling a little bit exposed or a little bit kind of invaded at the moment. Then that's going to be something that's a potential trigger as
Certainly,
well.
absolutely. Again, if they don't feel sufficiently informed, but are expected to come up with sort of logic and rationale reasonings and things like that, particularly at short notice, yeah, definitely there's the potential there. And then that can get them questioning, what are the merits?
Yeah.
Why are we doing the change? I can see what you're trying to achieve, but is this the right way of achieving it? Yeah. So, and again, these people are knowledgeable and smart. If they've got lots of experience, they may be a wealth of information. And if you haven't gone to them, let's say they're a subject matter expert, and you have not gone to them and gone, what are your thoughts on this before this change happens and all this? If you haven't sort of referred to them and asked them what their opinion is, they could very well be sat there looking at it going, this ain't going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. And others don't see the value in that subject matter expertise that they have.
Yeah.
Moving to the 6, also another think it unconscious motivator, which is to be safe and secure.
Yes. 6s seem to be thought of as worriers. And they're not, I suppose. They can be.
Have the potential.
Yes, we've got to explore the reasons why they would worry.
Yes.
So 6s have got, and they are really, they've got the capacity to see into the future. It might not seem apparent straight away when I say that they've got the head, like the inside of the head is like a Gantt chart. So if we give them all the information they require, they've got the capacity to construct it in order and see into the future and anticipate where something can fall over. And because they can do that, they can put something in place to stop that happening. But if you don't get all the information, they can't do that. So the first bit that I seem to find with a lot of 6s is, if there's a gap in the information, they can't get past that gap. Why is that missing? Why is that? So we've got Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Echo. What's happened to Delta? Why something? What's missing there? Why is that missing? And let's face facts here. It might not be a very important thing. It might be the least important thing, but I'm not going to share it with you because it makes me look incompetent, so I'm going to keep it back. Doesn't matter. They will get stuck on that gap because something is missing in the chain. I was talking to a lady who works for the police. She works in the department that's concerned with standards. I can't remember the name of the department at the moment, but she works in this, and she was explaining it to me, and she was saying, give me all the information, I will not judge you on it. However, if you don't give me all the information, I will then judge you. Yes. Yeah? Yes. Because 6s, and again, it's one of those things where if they're in a good place, it's great, because the thing is with them is they will not fail due to their lack of preparation, but they're very concerned of the consequences of failure. So 6s have got pencil cases, and they've got fleeces in the boot, and they've got a waterproof jacket just in case it rains, and a slab of water. They've covered everything off. They will never fail due to their lack of preparation.
Yeah, it's that risk analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got it all covered off, but they're very much focused. So their positivity, their focus is, I will never fail due to my lack of preparation. But that's because their focus is on potential consequence of failure.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to the 7, which is, I suppose, quite different to the 6. And the 7, this unconscious motivator is simply to enjoy life and be happy.
So where the 6s is very conscious about the consequences of failure, 7s don't give a damn. No. Yesterday's been and gone. Tomorrow never comes. What we're doing today is exciting. Yeah. Are you going to capture my imagination? Is it going to be interesting? Yeah. So again, we've got these people who have got the capacity to enjoy positivity, driving towards something, lots of things going on, very interesting, very exciting, lots of plates spinning, lots of balls in the air. What might happen? Ooh, yeah. But again, with a potential Mr. Chow attitude. But did you die? Okay, right. So the thing is about 7s is we've already mentioned about challenging. but sort of asking why and things like that. And this is one of the roots of how we develop and we grow and we get different things. But sometimes that challenge can be a little bit inappropriate. But the thing is, sevens are very positive people, and they like other positive people. They like a can-do attitude. They like but what could we achieve here, and where could we go with this? And it's great. But if you flip it on its head, negative can't-do attitudes,
painful, boring,
mundane, repetitive, things like that, well, actually, that can put a seven into shadow, because you know what? It's not exciting. It's not interesting. I'm going to get distracted and do something else.
Yeah.
Avoid negativity. Why be negative when we can be positive? Why focus on what we can't do? And we can see now when we start thinking about our interpretation of other people's actions. So let's say that you've got a 5 and a 7 in the room, and when this idea drops, a 7 is all about the possibilities. Well, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this. It's going to be sexy, it's going to be interesting. And the 5's going, well, we can't do that unless we do this, and we need to be able to do that, and this needs to be. Well, that can be perceived as a can't-do attitude by a 7.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas actually, what a 5 is doing is being thorough.
Yeah.
So now we can see where sometimes some interactions can put other people into shadow.
Definitely. Moving on to, so from one do it unconscious motivator to another do it unconscious motivator, which is the 8.
8.
Strong and self-reliant.
Strong personalities and an almost pathological belief of their own capabilities. Yeah. Interesting people. We could go on for ages about 8s. However, with the 8s, we've got to understand that they're not backwards in coming forwards, but people love that about an 8. If an 8's in a good place, you know exactly where you stand with an 8. Yes. They can be quite forthright, but an 8's attitude is just a lack of ambiguity. If you're doing something right and an 8's in a good place, an 8 will tell you. They won't go over and above, but you will know exactly where you stand with an 8. If an 8's in a good place and you're not doing something right, an 8 will coach, advise, guide, support. They will do all the things, because you know what? The most important thing for an 8 is the team to succeed.
Yeah.
It's not about them. It's about the team. It's about the group, because to them, that is what success looks like. If the team can succeed and get where they need to be, you know what? How can I promote that? How can I get that where it needs to be? However, if an 8 is not in a good place, they can be a little bit blunt. To them, it's exactly the same as before. It's a lack of ambiguity. But now we've got to start considering the ears, that bluntness, that forthright word or phrase, the ears that falls on, because some people won't react well to that. But also, and it's a really, really weird thing, you can tell whether an 8's in a good place or a bad place before they even walk in the room. They've got, I don't know what it is, they can change the weather.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
without actually saying anything. Yeah. So if they're having a bad day, oh God, here we go. There's just something in the atmosphere. But yeah, I think it's a mirror window thing with the 8s. So if an 8 is running a team, and the team is successful, and you go up to an 8 going, oh, you must be so proud, you've done this work, you've done that work, an 8 would be the first person to turn around and go, it's not about me, it's about the team. They're the ones that need telling. They're the ones that achieve this. It's on them that they've got that success. So it's the window over the team. So it's them down there that have achieved that. However, if they're not in a good place, or if the team doesn't succeed, if the team falls short, or we don't achieve what we need to achieve, that's when that window turns into a mirror, and an 8 will turn around and go, right, okay, so now it's about me. What could I have done differently? How could I have affected a different outcome? What could I have done that? So now we can see that there's a bit of reflection there. But the thing is, they've got to be dynamic. They've got to be out there. They've got to be themselves. So if that is curtailed in any way, if people try and control or manipulate them, if there's too many rules and regulations and things like that, then that stop them from doing their thing, then that could potentially put them in shadow as well.
Definitely. And as we always say, last but by no means least, the 9 to have peace and harmony.
Peace and harmony. So yeah, really interesting people. Very very gifted mediators. So if people are kicking off on each other, if there's a bit of drama in the office, but it doesn't involve them, nines are quite good mediators. So they'll drop in the middle and they'll calm everybody down, refocus everybody on the outcomes that need to be achieved. And you know what? They can motivate, enthuse, and inspire in that way. The problem is nines generally, and again, I've got to say this generally, don't relish conflict and confrontation when it involves them.
It goes against the motivation, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. So if it involves them, they can do conflict and confrontation. They just don't like it, and if they can avoid it, they will do. So if they feel attacked or judged or criticised or in any way, sometimes it might be that they've got to make a decision. And nines, again, generally speaking, not all nines, because the nines can be different. But some nines, when they're in shadow, would rather make no decision than the wrong decision. In an effort to try and avoid conflict and confrontation, when actually what you're doing is pushing everybody's buttons by not making a decision.
Yes.
So that can really affect the capacity for change.
Definitely. And potentially speaking from experience, because you have a 9 in your profile, don't you?
Yes, so I'm a 9-1.
Yes.
And this is the thing that I sort of alluded to earlier on. So dear listener, just to regale you with a tale, myself and Bernice were in a car driving to an appointment, and I was in the back, and me being a 9-1, so I've got that perfect correct and right. But I've also got that peace and harmony. So I might notice things that aren't right, but I won't necessarily say anything.
Yes.
So we're in the car. I'm sat in the back seat. Bernice is driving, and this car pulled out and cut us up, pulled into our lane. And if it was me that was driving, I would have let loose a string of expletives. I would have hit the horn. I would have been in shadow momentarily, because it's just not right. It's not right that person did it. What did Bernice do? She giggled and then said, "Oh, you're coming into my lane, are you? All right, okay, well, never mind." And I just sat there thinking, that is so different to how I would have reacted. But I can tell you this, I would much prefer to react like Bernice did than I did. Yeah?
Yeah. And this is where there's quite a difference between our unconscious motivators. So in that moment, what you saw there was definitely my 7.
Yeah.
To enjoy life and be happy. That said, just 2 days ago, I was driving back from London. I'd been in the very hot car for probably about 4 hours at this point. Someone tried to cut in front of me in the queue out of the services car park, and my 8 definitely came out in that moment, but definitely 100%. But this is it. When certain situations happen, dependent on what our unconscious motivators are, then that will have a significant different impact to how we ultimately respond to that situation. And of course, for this particular podcast, we're exploring change as well, aren't we?
Sure.
And for everyone listening, it's really key to almost have an opportunity to pause and reflect and consider, in the past, can I think of situations where, you know what, something happened or change happened within the business or organization? Hey, why not think about something outside work? What was the reason why in some situations I was able to buy into that straight away? But then on the flip side, the reverse side of that, in some situations, what was the reason why I was a little bit hesitant or resistant, or I really struggled to get on board with that? Because potentially it connects back to these motivators.
Good point. So let me flick that back on you. So what about you, Bernice? What situations have you been in where you've instantly got behind the change? It makes sense to you. You're already starting to get energized by this potential change.
Yeah.
But in other situations, maybe it de-energized you. You were resistant to change. What? Give me an idea.
I suppose the first one that comes to mind for me is when COVID hit. I was fairly new to the organization. I'd actually only been with this particular organization about 3 months. And the organization I had previously been at, I'd worked there for kind of 8-9 years. My entire career had been at this other organization. So new job, then the whole plan, everything completely goes out of the window, because now all of the training, everything that I was due to deliver, is completely gone. And my boss at the time gave me so much freedom and opportunity to just explore the options, right? Okay, so what are we going to do now? And it wasn't her saying, right, this is what you're going to do, this is how you need to do it. It was a case of, let's come up with some ideas. What can we do now? What is it that the organization needs? Because right now we are the support for the organization. How do we adapt to this? And for me, it was exciting. And I thought, wow, okay, I've got so much freedom now. Let's really think out of the box. What is it that people need at the moment? And how do I, as the development team, support them through this change? And that was a big thing for me. And knowing that I had the opportunity in the full level of control in what that might look like. And what's quite interesting now in reflection is, coming back to those unconscious motivators, my boss at the time had a 3 and 1 in their profile. So definitely had the same level of kind of forward focus, do it as I did, but there was a 1 in the mix. So there was definitely a few occasions where we would always kind of have a little giggle about it, because sometimes they would want to just, I'm not too sure, like what if it goes wrong? What if we don't get that right? But for me, it was, I could see the potential. And for my 7, I suppose, was probably thinking, well, so what? No one knows what's going on in the world right now. Everything's stopped. Everything's different. Let's just try it and see. And that 100% would be the situation for me. But I think it definitely connects and ties into not only my 7, but my 8 at the same time. So to then explore and think about, well, what are some of the situations where I was resistant? And I say to people all the time, my top 3 shadow behaviors: stubborn, irritable, defensive. They are probably guaranteed what you're going to see from me when my unconscious motivators are triggered. And I can think of various situations and occasions where change happened. And I think for me, it was initially maybe the 8, to be strong and self-reliant, independent. I don't want to feel weak. I don't want to have to rely on others or feel as though I'm out of control. That then I think triggers the 7. And there was one particular situation where that happened, and I felt as though I'd completely lost any freedom, any level of control and influence that I previously had. And you know what? I did not respond well to that change. And I feel sorry for the people who witnessed how I was, because I was deep in my shadow. I wasn't fun to be around. But for me, coming back to those motivators, it all comes down to, for me, the level of freedom that I have to be creative, to find ideas, and it was a level of control. Because if I feel as though I'm being told what to do, or I don't have the opportunity to speak what I think, or even just explore, then that's definitely something that can push me into that shadow behavior.
Interesting. It's worthwhile reflecting, understanding. Again, we're trying to sort of battle against our own biases, and just go, right, so what, when I was triggered, when this happened, why didn't I get on board with it?
Yeah, and it's really important for so as you're sat there listening to us talk about this, what is the why for you? What is the reason why you were on board with that? What was the reason why you're against it? Because it definitely is, the likelihood is that the answer to those questions will potentially be the same thing. So I suppose let's now just play a little game, Spencer.
Okay.
My 7 jumping in now. I think I might share some statements, and the statement potentially may connect with one of the unconscious motivators in regards to how they potentially may react or respond to change. And what I'd like you to do is just have a little guess, what unconscious motivator might that connect with?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's jump in with the first statement, which is, may have doubts about the merits of the change and resist because there's not enough data or information to support it.
Yeah, I can see that particularly with that last line, not enough data or information to support it. So I would say that's a 5.
100%. Yeah.
To be knowledgeable and smart.
Yeah. So potentially if you have a 5 within your profile, that might be something that potentially you might connect with, or you can maybe think, you know what, in that situation, when that happened, there wasn't enough data or information. And you know what, that was exactly what was holding me back from getting on board with that change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Moving on to another one. May disengage from the change because they perceive it to be, you know what, a little bit too restrictive, a little bit complicated, or you know what, there's just way too much detail and information, and I'm a bit bored of it now.
That's 7 in it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when it gets a little bit, you know what, let's just go with it. Does it feel right? Let's just go with it. Yeah. Too much bureaucracy, it loses its attractiveness.
Yeah, that's the thing. So again, thinking of that motivation is to enjoy life and be happy. If it feels as though it's a little bit restricted, a trigger for a lot of 7s is being pinned down and hemmed in. So potentially that could be the reason why they may resist. Another one for you, Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
May feel vulnerable when change happens or when that situation occurs. And what then might happen is they become a little bit of resistant because they don't really feel stable at the moment, or they feel a little bit uncertain and they don't know what this is going to look like in the future.
That sounds like a 6.
Yeah.
Sounds like a 6 with that stability and security and vulnerability. That vulnerability thing is quite big with the 6. We sometimes find that they don't like to feel exposed. That's safe and security. And again, not all 6s are the same, but the safety and security is very important to them, and not knowing what's coming up. So yeah, if they feel exposed or vulnerable, it might be because they need a little bit more information.
Yeah, and if there's not been enough clarity on the change, why it's needed, because also as well, if they view that change as, you know what, that's completely unnecessary, there's no need for us to do that, or there's a big risk involved in that change, then that straight away is going to be a potential turn off. Let's go for another one. Might worry about potentially the upheaval of the change, and you know what, it feels as though there's going to be a big impact on people, and then this might happen over here, and how I just don't want to be involved in it because it just feels a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Love that giggle there, Spencer.
9.
Do you connect with that?
I'm getting 9. I'm getting a 9 vibe from that.
And why would that be the 9 to have peace and harmony?
Because again, when there's a little bit of disharmony, when there's too much going on, I quite like a lack of drama. We like that sort of everybody's getting on well, and everybody and there's no sort of disruption and things like that, and people know what's expected of them and things like that. So yeah, that 9, that they know it is that. What's the word? One of the things I found with 9s, where I've found with other people is when we go into their shadow self, they talk about not being sure about something, and it's usually they don't like being taken too far out of their comfort zone. Yeah. And when they question that, and they sort of say, "Well, I like to be challenged." Yes, to your values, and I think the buzzword out of that is too far out of the comfort zone. I like to be challenged myself, but it needs to be within my boundaries. Yes. So I like to be pushed, but not too far. And again, you are, as an individual, you'll know what that too far looks like, because it's not going to be the same for everybody. Yeah. So when we start talking about the comfort zone, I like a little bit of change, but it needs to be a moderate level of change.
Yes.
And I need to be fully aware of why we're changing and do a little bit of change here. Is that all right with you? Yeah, okay.
Let's not cause too much chaos.
Yeah, okay.
Not too much upheaval.
Yeah. So
just a little bit.
Sounds like 9.
Yes. Another one for you, Spencer. Fear of failure might cause them to potentially resist the change. And it might be that, you know what, in their view, change might completely derail us and completely get in the way of us being able to do X, Y, and Z.
Okay. I think straight away when we said fear of failure, it's diametrically opposite to succeed and achieve.
Yes.
I think that there's a couple of things that can influence this, because I've met a few people who, in the succeed and achieve bit, actually don't mind failing. Because the thing that influences that more than anything else is, what culture do you live in, as in your business, your organization? How do they treat failure? Do they use it as a stick to beat you with, or is it an opportunity to learn? Because again, we find a lot of threes are drivers, and threes will pile into that. This is what we need to achieve. That's where we're going. That's what the objective is. That's the flag on the hill. That's where we're going. There may be failure because there's not enough attention to detail to how we're going to achieve that. But the thing is, they learn from those failures. So because they need to succeed and achieve that outcome, that is the paramount to them. So by doing that potentially without too much attention to how we're going to achieve it, may very well result in failure. But what they'll do is they'll learn from it and go again, and go again, and go again, and they will keep going. They are tenacious. But when they're focused on failure, that's not a good thing for a 3, because they need to be focused on the success. So they will be in shadow. So I would say that's a 3.
Yeah, spot on, definitely. Next one. Might potentially worry because it doesn't feel right to them. Also, as well, it could be, you know what? But what if we make a mistake? What if we're challenged on how we go about it? What does that potentially sound like?
That's a 1.
Yeah. I was trying not to give too many kind of keywords or buzzwords away there.
I'd relate to that so much about mistakes and things like that, because again, we've had people. Some people see ones as perfectionists, but ones don't necessarily see themselves as perfectionists. It's just the right way of doing it. It's the right way of doing it,
and they just find it very easy to spot what does that look like. That's the right way because of X, Y, and Z, and that's the wrong way because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. So there's very little bandwidth for variation in there. If they've established the right way of doing things, that's it. I tell you what, I'll give you an example. We were talking to a client who was strongly identified as a 1. He was a 1. I can't remember what his other one was, but he was talking about cooking. So when he's doing cooking, when he's cooking for the family, he has to go through the recipe and get all the ingredients out. Before anything happens, he's got to get all the ingredients out. If there's an ingredient missing, it's not going to happen. You don't cook.
Wow, okay.
Yeah? Whereas there's other people like you as a 7, right?
He does not want to come into my kitchen.
That's missing. So what if we put a bit of that in, a bit of that in, and a bit... So there's the capacity. Ones have got the capacity to improvise and adapt, but only within narrow parameters. Whereas with a 7, you know what's the worst that could happen? Yeah? Okay. So when we start talking about making mistakes, if I want to achieve that thing, if I want to make that burger, I've got to have all these ingredients, because all these ingredients go into making that burger. If there's an ingredient missing, I can't make that burger. Yeah, and I've got to, let's say all the ingredients are there, this person has to go through every single step of that recipe. Yeah, and that's the thing, is measuring out, weighing. All that has got to be precise, because if I get all that precision done and all accurate, well, I'm going to get that. Yeah. So yeah, that definitely sounds like a one.
Yeah, 100% is the one. So a few more for us to go. So might get a little bit easier potentially because we've only got a few left. So for the next one, with this unconscious motivator, potentially it might be that there's a bit of resistance to the change due to a feeling of being out of control, not being able to have an influence over something. It might even be that for some people with this motivator, that they have to be maybe reliant on other people, and that could cause a potential resistance. Or it might even be that, you know what, they're viewing that situation and they're thinking to themselves that that's not the way that I'd do it. I wouldn't do it that way.
Yeah. That there's a couple of numbers there, but one thing that you said there about reliance on other people, that sort of makes me think it's an 8. Yeah, that out of control, because the thing is with an 8, if you push an 8 will push back.
Yes.
Yeah. They won't be shy to push back. If they see something's wrong, or they will say the piece, and that might be appropriate or it might be inappropriate. However, that 8 needs to that 8 has the capacity to see things. They make the difficult decisions, and they take charge when nobody else will take charge. And they see things as a challenge rather than an impossibility. How hard could it be? Must be something that an 8 says to themselves on a regular basis. I could do that. Yeah, I could do that. How hard could it be? They understand this isn't arrogance, by the way. This is, well, I need to do a bit of studying. I need to learn about this. I need to do this. I need to do that.
Yeah. And they almost thrive from a bit of challenge, like a little bit of friends, quite happily in comparison to the 9. They're quite push me outside of my comfort zone. You know what? Push me outside of my comfort zone. You're probably going to get a much better result than where I am in the comfort zone.
An absolutely great example. As I mentioned earlier on, I'm a 9-1, and I went for a meal with an 8-1, right? So she actually, you might know her. We'll talk afterwards. But went for a meal with an 8-1, and the meal was late. It was cold. It wasn't what we ordered. All this, that, and the other. So the waitress brought the meal round and put it in front of me, and I didn't want the waitress to feel bad, so I just smiled and went, "Thank you very much." Whereas went to the 8-1, dropped me in front. So we both share a 1. Yes. We both know that it's not right. But I'm a 9. I don't want conflict or confrontation. She's an 8. She don't mind it. She turned around and went, "Don't let go of the plate. Take it back. It's wrong. It's cold. It's late. Blah, 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 blah. Take it back." Yeah. So they have no compunction about calling it out, whereas I don't want that person to feel uncomfortable, so I won't. Yeah. So I would more prepared to say, "Thank you very much," and I'll just suck it up and whatever. Yeah. And I just, the lesson from that is I won't come back to this restaurant, whereas the 8 with the 1, they'll see something's wrong and they will call it out as they see it.
Yeah. And I think that's something to bear in mind within your organisation, in those who you can see and hear that resistance and potential challenge. The likelihood is it connected to that unconscious motivator, and right now they're feeling almost a little bit weak, and that's the reason why that resistance is coming into play.
Yeah, so they'll call it out. I mean, we've seen many people who are middle managers and things like that, where change has happened or change is happening and they feel powerless. They don't feel part of it. Yeah. They don't feel referenced. They don't feel, and they will potentially just dig their heels in and go, "Well, it's not how I'd do it. I would do it differently. And there's a reason why I'm in this position." And so they can be quite. I'm not keen on saying it, but bloody minded and stubborn, because not that it doesn't make sense. They can see why the change is happening. It's just not the way that they do it, and why wouldn't you do it my way? Because I know what to do.
Yeah. So we've got a couple left. So the next one for you to tell us about is, might worry that the change means that they won't be as involved potentially. It might even be that the change might make them feel as though they're a little less worthy in a situation and that they aren't able to have an impact.
A bit too-ish.
A bit too-ish.
A bit too-ish, yeah. I think that, again, it's not necessarily the to be needed and appreciated, although they might not be needed and appreciated. But it's just that, well, am I part of this? And again, I think this is one of the great things about changing communication. Again, a great example, because sometimes we tend to find that if some people aren't involved in something, we don't tell them about it, but a two will feel marginalised because they want to be involved. So it may be a great example we found with the two was they actually talked to their line manager about this because they were not that they weren't being involved, but they weren't told they were involved. So they were, because there was a vacuum of communication, they filled it with all sorts of stuff. Maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as valued as I am. If that mattered, so the outcome of that was the manager turning around to him and sort of saying, not just to that person, but to everybody, right, I'm going to go talk to these three people over here. I'm not ignoring you. It just doesn't concern you. You've got a lot on your plate at the moment. I'd like you to focus on that. I'm going to speak to these people over here. So they're not being ignored. It's just that it doesn't concern them and they've got enough on the plate. Right, that's fine. Absolutely fine. I know exactly where I stand now. It doesn't concern me. It's just going to be a distraction or a waste of time, so I'm on it. So now they're not triggered into being in shadow because they know why they're not involved. And it's that communication, I think, is absolutely key.
100%. And I think it's definitely connects with quite a few, but especially that two, because the two wants to be connected, wants to be involved, and sometimes wants to have a bit of an influence as well. Not because they want all of the limelight, because they want to be of service.
Yeah. Particularly if it's something that is their specialist area.
Yes.
So they've got valuable insights or experience where that's concerned. So it might be that they're not involved with the change, but actually they've got insights that could affect that.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So by process of elimination, we've got one left. So let's have a think about this one. You know what? With this particular unconscious motivator, they might just resist the change because you know what? It just doesn't feel right. Full stop.
4.
Yeah.
Absolutely 4. And that is not by the process of elimination, but that is the feeling that sort of just doesn't feel right. It's got to feel right to them. But again, when we start talking about the 4s and we're saying about when you want the best out of a 4, they've got to be able to emotionally invest in what it is, put the heart and soul, because that's where their special bit comes in. They contribute, but with their emotions, with their feelings, it's their motivation. It's their it's going to be different. It's going to be judged. It's going to be but they've got to put the heart and soul into it. And the thing is, if you have given them the capacity to do that, then that's great. If they don't feel like it's part of it, we were talking to a senior group. I think they were. No, I'm not even going to go there. But it was a senior group of executives, and there was a lady in the group. I think she was actually a chairperson or something like that. She was. Tenured lady. She'd been in the company in business for a long time. She looked like a lady who'd been in the business for a long time. But one of the things that she was very passionate about, she was 4, but one of the things she was very passionate about was heavy metal music. Okay. You would never guess it by looking at it. You would never, ever, ever guess. And we're not talking about sort of dad rock. Or we're not talking about sort of or a little bit spicy, maybe Guns N' Roses or something like. No, she's full on heavy metal, full on heavy metal. When people surprise you like loved it, and she was. It was what she was all about. So when she was out of a business suit and all this and the other, nice. She was doing the festivals, she was doing the record fairs, she was going to see gigs and all this and the other. And she was explaining, she was saying that when she tells other people and they show an interest in it. Or maybe they might turn around and go, it's not my sort of thing. She's like well, it is mine. Yeah? Okay. But if somebody turns around and she's in her shadow and they turn around and go, well, it's just screaming, isn't it? It's just noise. She feels hurt by that and she feels like she's got to come out and defend it. Yes. You just don't try, do you? You just don't get it. And it's passion. It is absolute passion and emotion, and it was that heartfelt thing. So, again, when you start talking about feelings, if they don't feel it's right, then they're going to resist change. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, That's been really valuable, Spencer, just to really break it down, looking at every single one of these unconscious motivators, not only so going right back to basics in regards to, well, this is the motivation towards what influence does that have when change happens? Does that impact it? Then flipping that and looking at what do they seek to avoid? And then just some examples in the mix there. So hopefully that's been really valuable to people listening, not only for themselves, but when thinking about leading a team and organization. But if we were to then start to summarize and think about, well, what can we do about this? And I might be able to identify what my potential block to change is. How do I then even think about overcoming that block to change?
I think the first thing is that it's recognizing that it's a block to change. Yeah. Absolutely. But again, we talk about all these things at T2. We talk about the sort of the logical and rational mind and the emotional mind when we're talking about the chimp paradox and things like that. I think one of the things that I've learned is well, firstly, works for me anyway, to write it down, because it goes from the emotional brain into the logical brain then. Yeah. And when it's in the logical brain, rather than emotional brain, we can start thinking, right, so what level of control do I have? Yes. How can I perceive this differently? What level of control do I have? Is it in my control or not? Which I think is a great opening question. Because if it's not in your control, if there's nothing you can do about it, quite literally nothing you can do about it, then why worry about it? Yeah. But there's something that is blocking what can I do about this? What level of control have I got? If I've got some level of control, that's what I'm going to focus on.
Yeah. And I think so it's something that, even from a personal perspective, in the past with situations, I sometimes force myself to go through a bit of a narrative in my mind. And it is exactly that, as you described it. Is this something that I have influence over? Can I actually control this? And if the answer to that question is no, then sometimes you just have to, what I call sumo it, which stands for shut up and move on. And I use it with myself quite often, because I know that I've got that 8 there, and which can be quite strong in that reaction. And also as well, my 7 wants to try and avoid kind of pain and discomfort and feeling bored. I have to be, and I'm a double do it as well. So I know that both of those unconscious motivators are going to express themselves or want to. So sometimes it's a case of, is that something that I can control? You know what? No. So sometimes we just simply have to lightheartedly shut up and move on. Let's focus on what it is that we can influence and control. And ultimately, change, transformation, as we said at the very start of this, it's always happening, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. And again, having the self-awareness to recognize why you're blocking change. And not be bloody minded enough to sort of go, well, I can see it. Why can't everybody else see it? I'm just going to dig my heels in. Yeah. It's that capacity to challenge yourself and go, right, so what can I do about this? What it gives a level of control. If we have a low level of control, but a high level of stress, we're going to be in anxiety. If we think about the times that we've been in anxiety and stress in our lives, is usually due to a lower level of control. Yes, definitely. Yeah. So what is going to increase my level of control? So it might be knowledge, it might be training, it might be discussion, it might be questioning, it might be challenging appropriately. But all these things can happen to give us a better insight into what's going on. So, but the thing is, it's also informing the people who are creating the change. So when we start talking about change needs to be communicated effectively, it's not just blitz everybody with all the information. It's recognizing some people are going to need the capacity to ask questions. Some people are going to need the vision. Some people are going to want to understand the why. Some people want the positivity and the what we're going to get out of this change. Some people need to be able to be critical and have those criticisms supported, questioned, whatever you want. But the thing is, you've got all these different unconscious motivators within your team, within your organization. So you've got to cater for them all. Don't get me wrong, you're still going to have some people who don't agree with it. But the thing is, you can snatch them back from the edge. Yes. You can say, right, okay, do you have questions? what these questions look like. Do you need a little bit of time to think about what those questions are going to be? Yeah, but it all starts with you. You've got to recognize that you're going to be you're in a position where you're resistant to change, or you've got a block to change. If just out of interest, just out of interest, your interest, listener, your interest. By the time you hear this, if you look at the productivity tools on T2 Hub, we've actually got a list of potential blocks to change for all the unconscious motivators. So again, not all of them may apply to you, but if you start looking down at, I'm a 9-1, I look at 9s and 1s and I go, yeah, I can see me doing that. But just to give you a bit of an insight as to why you can sometimes feel in shadow or triggered or chimpy or whatever, you look at that and go, right, okay, so why does that happen to me? Is it a lack of information? Is it too much information? Is it focus on why this change has happened? Why does the change make sense to me? Yeah. So we can start examining why we can be potentially resistant to change or blocked to change, and what we can do about it. What is in our control to be able to do that?
Yeah. And sometimes it's something as simple as kind of thinking, well, you know what, if once I've identified that this is my block and this is the one that, you know what, I can really connect with this is what stops me from buying in, this is what's potentially pushes me into my shadow, it's then a case of asking ourselves, what advice would I give myself in order to try and remain productive, knowing myself, in order for me to try and get back to my best self? What do I need to do? And that's sometimes a really hard and difficult question to ask ourselves, but it's a really important one because it's exactly what we need to do. Now, especially if you are a leader, a manager within an organization, it's something that you really do have to do, and you have to do it effectively and you have to do it well. And in certain situations, you have to do it fast, because how you react and respond to this potential change will have an immediate influence over how everyone else is going to view the change.
Yeah. A team is a product of their environment, and you as a leader create that environment. So if you're going to approach change positively, you've got to do that, because that's your team will.
Yes, definitely. So I suppose a bit of a final thought then is coming back to that control piece that you mentioned there, Spencer. We can't always control what's happening within life, just in general. Life, we're always faced with uncertainty and things changing on a rapid and a fast basis. But especially within an organization, businesses have to transform and move with the times in order to stay successful. We can't always change what's happening, but we can certainly control how we respond to it. And that is where we can get really effective and we can be really productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah.
So if this has sparked any curiosity for anyone who is listening, you never know, it might even be that you've listened to this entire podcast and you don't even know what your unconscious motivators are. Hopefully some insights from Spencer has given you the chance to think, oh, you know what, that did sound a little bit like me. But if you are wanting to know what those motivations are for you, then please definitely do reach out. And we do quite a lot of workshops on this as well, where we really give people the chance to get to grips on what those blocks are. If there's anything that we can do to help support either yourself through changing the business, or maybe even help support your business through a change, please feel free to get in contact, get in touch, and we'd love to help. So Spencer, thank you very much for sharing all of that insight that you have from working with all of these unconscious motivators. And we'll be back soon for another T2 Hubcast.
Bye-bye now.